Recording. There we are. Hello, everyone. George Anastasopoulos here, once more, your host, Leadership Fitness Camp, and today's topic on today's camp is planning for leadership. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into it and talk a little bit about what planning for leadership looks like and what it's all about. Um, Hopefully, this doesn't disturb anyone as you look at this particular image. That's Mike Tyson on the right, a ferocious boxer from some years ago who said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And arguably, that's very true. And so, planning is one of those elements that has two sides to it. It's important to do it, and at the same time, it's also important not to take it too seriously because things change, and in the moment, we need to improvise and to modify those plans so that we, in fact, have the greatest possible, best possible outcome as we go through doing whatever it is we need to be doing. So Mike Tyson's scenario and perspective on planning is absolutely right, because if you're not going in fully planned with a game plan, understanding your opponent, understanding your own strengths, understanding how you can possibly win the fight or the battle or the circumstance that you're engaged in, then you have a greater likelihood of losing anyway. But know that as soon as you get punched in the face the first time, things change. And so let's talk a little bit about what today's camp is all about as we look at this concept of leadership planning, or planning for leadership. And that is the objective. Today's objective is to acquire uncommon planning sense. And so we're going to give you a bit of a spin on how to look at planning within the concept of sales planning. And it starts with this, where just to give it some context and parameters, Albert Einstein said, one of the smartest men on the planet in the 20th century, certainly said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And of course, that's very, very true if you think about it. And yet, for some reason or another, we plan the same old thing consistently, and we go through this routine of planning without really considering doing new things because they're scary and uncomfortable. When in fact, and then of course expect different results as a consequence of doing the same old thing. And of course, that's the definition of insanity. The other quote I want to share with you is this, and it comes from a former chief executive officer of Pepsi Cola, whom I worked with for some years. The company I worked with for some years back, a bunch of years ago, and he was all about, radically changing and moving forward. And his philosophy was, if it ain't broke, break it. Philosophy was, not if it ain't broke, don't break it, but rather if it ain't broke, break it and make it better. Because the conventional wisdom is, of course, not to break it. It's everything's good, leave it alone, that kind of thing. Well, that's very comfortable, but in the world of moving forward and truly making leadership a part of your organization and your life and your role in your career, then if it ain't broke, break it and make it better, was his philosophy, and it served the organization exceptionally well for many, many years. And so let's talk a little bit about why planning. Like, why do we want to plan? Well, here's an example, And so this is a map image, obviously, of a neighborhood. And unless you happen to be familiar with this neighborhood, it's just a bunch of streets. And the town name is obviously blocked out there, so you can't see it. And so unless you happen to be familiar with this neighborhood or live in this neighborhood or have visited it, this could be any neighborhood anywhere. And so when we're this close to it, kind of hard to tell where this is. This could be pretty much any place. But what if we zoomed out and gave it a higher perspective, where we looked from a higher view? Oh, okay. Same neighborhood, but now we're looking at it from a higher level. And so you'll notice now that there are some major arteries. There's a QEW, there is a golf course. And so some things are coming into view now because you've got a broader perspective, a higher perspective that you may not have seen when you were too close to the action doing your stuff. But what if we zoomed out a bit more, took an even broader view? Oh, well, yeah, look at this. Now we're discovering that this town is actually on the north shore of Lake Ontario. So we've got a clearer picture of where this is now by stepping back a little further or a little higher up to see it. But what if we go even further up? Well, that's more like it. Now we see that this town happens to be the town of Oakville. It happens to be on the north shore of Lake Ontario. It happens to be near Toronto, and it is very much in the Niagara Peninsula area. And so, as we continue to zoom back, and if I continue to zoom back and up, you'll see an entire map of Canada and the United States, and eventually the world. And so, that's what planning's all about. It's about stepping back, stepping up, and having a look at things in a broader context, as opposed to merely going through the day-to-day duties of our jobs, which are important, arguably, but without planning, we're caught perpetually just doing stuff. I want to leave you with a couple of quotes here, which I think are very important as we look at the concept of planning. I suggest that excellence doesn't happen by accident. And so if you truly believe in excellence, as opposed to merely doing a lot of stuff, then action without vision is a nightmare. And vision without action is a daydream. So if you think about planning, I gave you the perspective of the maps where we're zooming back and out. Here's another perspective in this image, which looks like a lens. And so you can see the horizon around the lens, but it's fuzzy. It's a little unclear. But as you look through the lens, it brings it into crystal clear clarity. And so this old Japanese proverb speaks volumes to that. Vision without action is a daydream. So if I'm imagining doing stuff, well, you know what? That's a daydream. And if I'm just doing a bunch of stuff without really knowing why or why I'm doing it, where I'm going with it, and how it's of value, then really that could turn into a real nightmare. So the concept of planning and the idea of planning is very, very valuable and very, very worthwhile. So I wanted to set the context for you on planning initially and give you, here's marketing 101 on one slide. So this is the way to look at conventional and typical planning processes. And by the way, you should be doing this anyway. I'm not here to teach you this. I'm actually here to teach you something that isn't this, but it's in this context. And so think about this. Think about planning as an hourglass, where you've got the top portion, which represents an analysis portion, and the analysis work that takes place in actually doing designing a plan. So we don't actually sit down to write plans. We sit down to actually analyze stuff in order to help us actually develop plans. And like an hourglass, the work in analysis takes place in the upper portion of the glass. And in the bottom portion of the glass comes the plan. And in the middle of the hourglass, there's this narrow neck. And I call that the SWOT analysis. And so if you think of the top portion of the glass, where we're doing analysis, we're doing our analysis on what things? Well, we're doing it on things like our competitors, who they are, what they do, how they compete with us, and so forth and so on. Everything we could possibly understand about what makes them them. We're doing it on our products. So what it is we're selling, products or services, what it is we're selling, what makes them unique or competitive, what makes them superior, what makes them different, etc., etc. We're doing our analysis on our customers, how we serve them and how they fit into the overall equation, the nature of those customers, whether they're large or big, whether we transact regularly or less regularly, whether it's interactive or transactional, and so forth. And all that analysis, which takes place in the upper part of this hourglass, flows through the neck of the hourglass, called the SWOT analysis. Strengths, where we have the edge based on the analysis. Weak opportunities, where we can leverage those strengths. Weaknesses, where they have the edge, someone else. And threats, where we're at risk. And those four areas of a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, are really the funneled, distilled, summarized statements from our analysis in the top half of the hourglass. And then once we create that, we flow into the bottom half of the hourglass, excuse me, and deal with, and I apologize if I'm sounding a little hoarse today, but I do have a cold. And we flow into the bottom half of the hourglass, and that is what a plan might look like, with a goal, big goal, series of objectives. Today I'm going to share with you a little bit about what kinds of leadership strategies we ought to be thinking about, and of course tactics that flow from that. And so this would be a typical hierarchy for a plan structure. You have your goals, you have your objectives, variety of strategies, and then some tactics, the stuff that we actually break a sweat and do things with. And that's what a plan process would look like. There you go. Marketing Planning 101 in one slide. But I'm here to kind of challenge the common sense of that approach with this uncommon sense and challenge you to think of the fact that the answer, which is your plan, is in the question. So it isn't so much the analysis we do and the plans we come up with, as much as it is making sure that we're asking the best questions to come up with the best possible answers. And so the framework I want to show you here today is a concept of questions. What kinds of questions and where should we be asking these questions in order to come up with plans? And so if you recall from the slide 2 slides ago where I showed you the bottom half of the hourglass, which had strategies and tactics, well, the strategies in leadership, especially sales leadership, are these ones that are important for us to consider. First one is strategies around staffing. Yep, it's all about people. And that really is all about having the right people that are doing the things that are necessary for them to do to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, those objectives and reaching those goals. By the way, pages 47 to 51 in your workbook. Other way around. Second strategy to plan for is support. In other words, what are your managers doing? How are they supporting the staff so that the staff is doing, the staff being the field sales organization, and doing their job? Third strategy to plan for is the sales structure, a structure that actually supports your managers and your staff to be able to do the things that are most important in serving your customers. The fourth, and there are 6 here that I'm going to share with you, the fourth is all about sales planning. So the plan itself and how to go about the planning process. The fifth one deals with sales and customer management process. That is how things get done. So it's one thing to say I've got the terrific people managed by terrific people in a support structure that makes sense, but how work gets done and how things get done, the process, as it were, the processes, also very, very important. And finally, the training, the tools, the resources. In other words, the kinds of axe sharpening that we're doing to make sure that everybody is fully capable of doing the things that they need to be doing. So in today's camp, I'm just going to concentrate on the first 3 bullet points here. Staffing, support, and sales structure. In a future camp, I'll talk further on sales planning, sales and customer management process, and training tools and resources, but time doesn't allow us to do all 6 here today. So I'm going to concentrate on the first 3, and I'm going to show you the kinds of questions, again, this was in your workbook, the kinds of questions you could be asking and looking to. So on page 47 of your workbook, Staffing Strategy, these are the kinds of questions we need to be asking about our staff. For example, what strengths and values will and should they have? What kinds of strengths do we want from our staff to have? What skills and competencies will they excel at? What work behaviors will they demonstrate? What education or training have they received before coming here? And what work or other experience will they have? So as you think about, went a little too far there. And so as you think about these 5 questions, right? What strengths and values will they have, should they have? What skills and competence will they excel at? What work behaviors will they demonstrate? What education or training have they received? And what other work experiences will they have? This designs for you a mechanism of actually creating a job qualification checklist. And so if you're looking for candidates, even if you're not, this becomes a checklist once you answer these questions of the kinds of things that are most important in getting the job done in your organization. So building your staffing strategy essentially means answer these questions. And so here's the homework I'm going to ask of you to do. And you can do it right now by pausing this and then hitting the play button again as soon as you're ready. That is, think about your organization. Think about the best person on your team Think about the ideal person on your team. And then answer these questions while thinking about that person and that ideal person. Welcome back if you've done that exercise, and I want to go through the next topic in our strategy discussion around building a plan, and that is support, which is really about what's happening on Sales Manager Street, page 48 in your workbook. And these are the kinds of questions we need to be asking about how our managers are doing what they're doing. How often are they field coaching, and how are they doing it? What kinds of things are they doing while they're field coaching? So we're assessing and asking questions around not just quantity, which is quantifiable, but quality, which is how they're doing it. In other words, the strengths, the capabilities, and the quality by which they are actually doing their field coaching. How and how often will they be training their reps? You know, we get so caught up in the business and selling this and talking to that customer and managing that problem and so forth, we lose sight of all these important things, like how often and how are they training their people to be terrific? How will they be rewarding and recognizing their people for a job well done? How will they be running their sales meetings? Do they have an agenda? Do they have an objective? Are these brief meetings? Are they, exploratory meetings? What kinds of meetings are going to be the most valuable for sales meetings to build the business? And again, it's all in the answers are all in the questions. You ask questions like these to the best of your ability. They don't have to be, you don't have to do hours and hours and hours of research for this. You already know these. This is about answering the question to your best of your ability and then building your plan around what the answers are that you've come away with. How will they be tracking and managing inputs? Examples of support strategy. And how will they be planning with their people? Because arguably, if a sales manager and you are doing sales planning, well, shouldn't the salespeople be planning for their territories, their customers as well? And so these are the parts of planning that's absolutely vital. And then lastly, how will they gather reps' comments? How will you gather reps' comments about their managers? Because ultimately, how you think the manager is doing is less important than how the sales rep thinks their manager is doing, because they're the one that are getting value from their manager, hopefully value from their manager. So gathering the reps' impressions, their comments about their managers, honest and candid. And so not as easy a thing to do because nobody wants to throw their boss under the bus unless they really dislike them. But establishing a culture of openness and honesty where the manager will benefit from learning that they're not as good as they think they are in supporting their reps, very, very valuable. And the third of the strategy areas that I'm going to touch on today is the sales structure strategy. And this is about your organization structure, right? So how well does that organization structure equip, support your sales team to understand customers' needs, service and meet those needs, understand and respond to changes to trends? And so your structure should be such that is flexible enough, if you believe it's of value to have that flexibility, to understand customers' needs. So if you are a drop and run type business where you're in and out, then your structure does not allow for understanding customers' needs, or for that matter, probably even servicing and meeting those needs, or perhaps even understanding and responding to changes and trends. And so if your structure is designed for you to drop and run, where your salespeople are essentially showing up, doing something really quick to take the order and then leave, then you better have a sales structure that does these three things somewhere other than with the field salesperson, because these need to be looked at and considered. What are customers saying about sales, about the sales rep, about the sales manager, about the sales service, about the customer desk? The service desk and so forth, and collecting that data and understanding what they're saying, very valuable. How does your structure compare to your competition? So how are they organized as a competitive, sales organization, and how does that compare to yours, and why are they different? I'm not suggesting for a minute they're better, but why are they different? Why are you different? Understand what the value of that difference is and what you're trying to get out of it. And lastly, how are you articulating how articulate is your long-term plan? So as you think about your sales structure, think about things such as the strategies and the actions to meet these goals. For your long-term plan, how articulate is your long-term plan for, growing sales, profits, and market share? Introducing new products, building customer loyalty, prioritizing sales resources and efforts. So as we look at structure, your structure is going to have to reflect things like how to meet long-term goals, grow sales, profits, market share, introduce new products, and so forth. And so structure is not unlike that map image that I zoomed out from as an example, page 49 in your workbook now. The further out you go, the more you consider the longer term perspective and the broader perspective of your planning efforts. And so as we conclude here today, action plan. Think about what's different now that you have taken an opportunity to take some of this in, what you might do next. Of course, write them down and tell 3 friends and an accountability partner. And your homework, how to get an A+, is to address the questions. I gave you a bit of an opportunity on the first one: staffing, support, and sales structure. Just answer the questions. If you do that exercise, answer those questions, I guarantee you will be surprised at what you learn about your planning and what you need to plan differently as you move forward into the future. And so lastly, as we conclude, I'm George Anastasopoulos. I'll leave you with this last thought. There are 2 types of plans or 2 types of forecasts. The first is wrong, and the next is lucky. And so there's always seems to be a passion for, comprehensive, articulate, well-structured, highly comprehensive plans. But as an old boss of mine once said, there's 2 types: wrong and lucky. So yeah, absolutely do them thoroughly and well to your best of your ability, but also recognize that as you get punched in the face, the plan has a tendency to get thrown out. All right. So with that note, thank you all. Have yourself a great day. Good luck. Bye for now.